So today the perfect day recording a moving podcast. It's raining. We switched clocks, so it feels like it's later. So it feels like it should be on the sofa. We did that yesterday. But going into the gym, switching around some routines to see if I can get more out of the evenings. So I'm also doing less running during winters, switch to a strength workout. So it'll be interesting to see if I get different ideas from that. But for now I've been thinking about the task at hand is basically for this month with my PhD too. Basically, now that I've got my data, I've got the categories analyzed within themselves. Now it's about putting them back together. So after the analysis comes the synthesis. And there are many ways you can do that. And recently I've had a moment in realizing that those ways need to be explored before a decision is made, and all of that needs to be documented, especially in a qualitative setting, so that people can one day replicate things, right? There is this idea that you cannot replicate qualitative studies, and that's to an extent true because of the changing nature of the phenomena that we study qualitatively. That tends to be why we pick qualitative paradigms. But the approaches could be there as a record for others that are going to learn from it, especially if they're doing practical studies, not ones that are trying to be strictly academic, but if you really want to answer questions. So I'm using approaches lately from design thinking for when I realize there's a choice to be made in the research design, rather than just pretending these are not decisions to be made. And it's helped me reflect on the scientific methods as forms of decision making under uncertainty, where you have a cookbook, but as soon as you start putting the recipe together, you realize there are so many variables that it does provide opportunity for creativity. And I'm going to take it as a positive, but obviously could be a negative. You don't want that creativity to be dialed up to the max, and especially in some of the harder sciences, you actually don't want that, right? And because you're not studying dynamic things, and we do need some studies that are not exploratory. I got inspired by this study that was shared by a friend that looked at, I think it was over 70 different teams of researchers being given the same task to do basically a quantitative study on a very well-known hypothesis. So kind of it's a known territory, so it's not exploratory, it's not the situation that I'm in, but basically it showed that the variation in the approaches was so high, and it wasn't, give chance, but also it wasn't, basically it was just subjective decisions. So if that means objectivity is a value that we hold, but it's not a natural phenomenon that exists out there outside of us, then there's still things we can do, right? We can aim for at least intersubjectivity by sharing data or getting other researchers to analyze our data, recording things. For my PhD, I'm trying to not only have all of my memos available together with the analysis and the final thing, but also this podcast where some of the shapings of ideas are clear, some of the side notes and some of the thought experiments that come up but are not related to PhD, they're also there. What I'm now facing is how to create a narrative structure that is true to the data but makes the PhD readable. So there is the core themes are actually given priority, and also there is a thread that can be followed. And then there's the argument that it shouldn't be just boring, right? As long as I'm true to my data, I can be engaging in the way that I write. And that's something that I really struggle with as methods kind of sometimes are suppressing creativity. But I think there is a way you can be true to your data and present your argument so it can be taken on board. Because end of the day, what we're trying to do is give ideas that give other people ideas in science. I think thinking about helping other researchers in the future should probably be at the back of our minds. It's a very kind of romantic, poetic approach to doing this. So what have I been doing? So I've been exploring narrative structures. I started with one that's the most forcing of a narrative, forces a narrative the most, and then another one that does that the least, I think, from what I can gather. And I've got others that are going to be explored. So the first one was, I just basically take the hero's journey. If you're not familiar with the hero's journey, it's basically the work of Joseph Campbell, who looked at many myths, stories that we tell each other, and found that there is a common cyclical pattern of storytelling, or the monomyth, or the hero with 1,000 faces. So a lot of our stories and movies today also follow that. And it tends to follow a structure of there is a hero, it's called to adventure. And initially there is a few trials and tests. Then there is a crisis where evil might beat over good, but the hero has tested and also knows how to act and overcome evil. And then after that, after the win, returns back home wiser to tell the story to others about how they can overcome evil. So I reflected on this. Headphones fell off. So it's full storm right here. So yeah, I reflected on this for a while, and I think where it comes from is basically life. You get born, you go to school, you've got people teaching you stuff. And, they're probably back from their own hero's journey, so they're telling you how you can learn from their experience. Whether you listen or not is a different thing. And then you go onto your adventure, slay your dragons, etc., etc. So that narrative, in the context of my PhD, it could fit in, because I noticed that what I've been asking people was to tell me their life stories through the places that they live in. Right. The focus is on the key decision points, and actually over the interviews we could have created some of the data together, right? So the way that I piloted and then change the questions, they do follow kind of a life philosophy trajectory, and asking people to talk about place actually gets them to open up about their personal philosophy without getting too deep or feeling anxious, because for some reason when people philosophize, it becomes a bit overwhelming to the brain, and it could make some people feel anxious that are not used to kind of philosophizing. It's also why some others get addicted to that feeling and end up doing just mental gymnastics and exploring every possibility as if it's possible, because, well, there's a height that you get from the muscle. But my kind of themes in the research, from being kind of born in a place and feeling a belonging to it, and then getting a sense of confidence from that, being from somewhere, and then from that developing an aura of confidence about yourself, and then finding other places where you can get a similar feeling from. It's not exactly the same as where you're from, but when you move, you can adapt wherever you put in if you get multiple reps of changing where you live. And you can learn how to find a sense of community, which is the key thing that you need. And then facing those challenges, kind of how the learning through experience could fit that narrative, but it's probably overfitting. So I've explored that, and I've got it explicitly mapped out on a board. And then I've explored another one where I've used the core theme of, I think, how I started this. I've been looking back through 5 years worth of draft that I've written to look at the objectives that I had written, because obviously they were shaped by this process. And I noticed rationality, do we make choices rationally, is a kind of a core question. It's different in the context of where to live. So using that as a filter on each of the themes. So in what sense could place identity be seen as rational or irrational? In what sense could being attached to new places could be seen as rational or irrational? So the themes that then you can talk about is, dealing with uncertainty. It's rational to feel a belonging when you have to deal with uncertainty. It's rational to want to be surrounded by people that make you so comfortable that you don't need to be always on, think, and just flow intuitively. Or as one participant put it, switch off your head and chill when you're feeling at home. And then when it comes to personal priorities as a theme, they're constantly shifting, but then over time they become a lot more about others rather than self. How could that be seen as rational? To care for others. Well, is it rational to transcend yourself? It makes you feel good, so rationality is linked to well-being of the self and others. Then when you look at the different rules of thumb and emotional aspects, then the theme of how intuition as a form of recognizing when you should move. And so I had people talk about they know their surroundings, they become very aware of their surroundings when they know that and they get an intuition that something is right. So how is rationality related to an intuition that you have a sense of the right direction? How does that feel? The themes of there being an emotional experience at any stage, any impression. There's always an emotional component. And then rationality being linked to learning from mistakes when your intuitions don't pan out, and you move to Japan and you realize that was not good, and then later you realize it takes time for ideas to gestate. So that's kind of things that participants talked about. So that one definitely works more, and I've been thinking of, as I go through the process and explore a few more, it will be not just an exploration of options, but a cumulative process. So just starting with one already is a part of the theorizing. But the last thoughts I've had today is are getting inspired about making it engaging and kind of pulling the argument through all the text. And a way that gets done really well it's actually in music. I mean, singing a chorus is the thing that pops into your head years later. So if I use my core theme of rationality and emotion, also intuition, these are the labels underneath. And I can't. Walking on the street has become a chore these days. I swear, since the pandemic, it just feels like we need indicators. But again, I'm not the one to judge on how they're part of it. I'm walking and talking. Anyway. I was trying to finish up. Oh yeah, so having a chorus, so bringing things back to the core thing, emotion, intuition. And again, these are words that are from the literature, and then I've got in my analysis already which themes are within the literature that I've looked, which ones I need to look for more literature, and which ones I think there isn't literature yet. Right? Let's go through a contribution, and then I'll bring these. So this is what's familiar. This is what might be on the edge. This is what might be new. So that kind of structure is the next one I'll be exploring.